So now that we understand the basics of algorithmic composition and what it is, I want to delve into the specifics of how we're going to be learning algorithmic composition hands-on in this module and the next one. In particular, I want to look at a few concepts behind EarSketch, the environment that we'll be using. EarSketch leverages the Python programming language, so I want to make sure we all understand what Python is. And EarSketch is itself an API, or application programming interface, so I want to explain what that is in the context of a programming language. And I also want to look at how we use a text editor as a specialized tool to write code. So simply put, EarSketch is a Python API for creating music according to DAW paradigms. And I realize there's a bunch of things here we need to explain in more detail, Python API, and also what it means that we're following a DAW paradigm here. So I'm going to do that in the next few slides. But first, I just want to say EarSketch is a tool that I've been involved in its development here at Georgia Tech over the last few years. We're very happy to share it with you. It's a free online coding environment for music, and we've been using it as a way to teach computer science in a way that's very exciting for students. But it's also very fitting to use in this course because it's a natural extension of everything we've been learning about the DAW up to this point and extending that into programming and coding. So let's talk first about Python. Python is just a general purpose programming language. There's nothing in it that's specific to music. You can use it to write some code that runs on a web server. You can use it to write some code that runs a scientific experiment. You can use it to write software that organizes your recipe collection. You can use it for just about anything. It is a very popular programming language. It is very popular in computer science education, but it's also usually in most lists you see one of the 10 most popular programming languages in the world. It's used by a lot of major companies and academics and just about anyone. It's also an open source language, so it's not controlled by any single person or company. You can contribute to the development of the Python language, and you can download all the source code that makes Python run. So EarSketch, like I said before, is an API, or an application programming interface for Python. And what an API is essentially a library of new functionality that extends what a programming language can do. And there's thousands and thousands and thousands of APIs for the Python programming language. EarSketch is one that happens to add special functionality for music, but there's also APIs that might add special mathematics functionality or scientific computation functionality. There's APIs that might help it network in new ways to connect to different kinds of servers and communicate. There's APIs that help it build graphical user interfaces. So APIs for all different kinds of things. Our API, again, is specific to music and adding this functionality into Python. And like I said before, the way we add music functionality into Python follows this DAW paradigm. So in modules 2 and 3, we spent a lot of time learning about how DAWs work. And so when we designed the functions that are part of EarSketch, we were thinking about that very carefully. You can do things like placing audio files on tracks, the same way that you would drag files into a DAW. You can do something very similar to pattern sequencing like we learned in Module 3, where you can create rhythms out of, in this case it's not out of MIDI, it's out of little bits of audio files. And you can also add effects to tracks, you can change effects parameters, and you can control effects envelopes that change those parameters over time. So this is all kind of at the core of how we think about coding with EarSketch, so it should all be very familiar to you as we get started. A couple important things. So EarSketch lives inside of your web browser, and it includes a couple tools that are built in when you load the EarSketch website. One of them is a text editor. In a text editor, you could write Python code in Microsoft Word or in TextEdit or kind of any program for writing text like that. But most programmers wouldn't do that. They would use a text editor because it offers them a few specialized things that aren't really possible to do just with a standard word processor or text editing program. So this is the EarSketch text editor here. And the first thing you notice is that there's line numbers on the left column that show you what every line number of code is. And this is very useful because when you make a mistake when you're programming, you usually get an error message that'll say there's something wrong in line 15, or this error is happening in line 27, and so on and so forth. And counting your lines from the top every single time to find the right line is pretty painful. So you really want a text editor that shows you those line numbers so you can very quickly find the line where the problem is so that you can resolve it. Another thing you see here is different text appears in different colors. So this stuff is in a kind of brown at the top. There's some things in purple. that is in green, and so on and so forth. And those are showing you different things that have different meanings in the context of Python programming. And so seeing this is called syntax coloring, and it helps you to visually kind of see different sections of code. Text editors can also help you with code indentation, keeping things tabbed to different positions on your screen, which is often important, is very important with some things in Python, like doing loops and defining functions, things that we'll look at later. The other thing that is included in the web browser for EarSketch is a DAW view. So this is like a miniature digital audio workstation built into your web browser. So when you write that code and you run it, this is where it shows up. So this should be very familiar from our experiences with Reaper. We have different tracks here. You can solo and mute tracks. You have a master track. You see effects lanes here that show effects parameters, and you can bypass those effects if you want to. And then, of course, you have waveforms that are showing up in your track. And you have transport controls here that let you play and pause and fast forward and rewind and loop. And you have this red column there is the play bar that shows you the current position. And these are, of course, the measures up here. If you click any given place, it'll move the play bar to that location, wherever it is that you happen to click. So this is all very familiar, very similar to how things work in Reaper. There's a key difference here, though, which is that you can't actually edit any of this stuff. You can't drag these audio files around. You can't draw effects automations or any of that, because you're doing all of that in the code. This is just letting you view the results of it and listen to it. If you did want to do further editing in a DAW of what you've created here, there are some ways you can get the work you've done in EarSketch out into another DAW for further editing. There's a menu that you can use to save your project that you've written with code. Save it as an RPP file. That's the Reaper project file. That will download it as a Reaper project that you can then open in Reaper and do any further editing on that you might like. There's also options to export what you've done as a WAV or an MP3 file. And that's very similar, of course, to the render command in Reaper that we looked at in Module 2. So if you wanted to share a mixdown of what you've done to someone else, be able to send them an MP3 or a WAV, you can use those export features to do that. So to review what we've covered in this module, we've talked about EarSketch and what it is. We've talked about the Python programming language. We've talked about EarSketch as an API, an application programming interface that extends the core functionality of Python to enable it to make music according to a DAW paradigm. We've also looked at what a text editor is, what a text editor specialized for coding is, and why we need to use that when we're writing our Python code. In the next video, we'll actually finally start writing Python code, and we'll create our first EarSketch script to make music.